I'll defend him. Every head in the courtroom turned at once. All eyes landed on the voice, sharp, unshaken, and utterly unexpected. A young black woman stood at the back of the courtroom. Her apron was still tied around her waist. Sweat glistened on her forehead. She clutched a worn folder of documents to her chest. Some laughed, some scoffed. A few pulled out their phones to record. "Who is she?" someone whispered. "Probably the cleaning lady." What's next?" "The janitor taking the bench." Laughter rippled through the gallery, but Maya Johnson didn't flinch. At 25, she had seen her share of condescension, but never had she felt the sting more sharply than in this moment, standing in front of the legal elite of Manhattan in a courtroom built to keep women like her on the outside. The judge blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Excuse me, Miss Maya Johnson, Your Honor. I want to stand as temporary counsel for Mr. Douglas Walker." The name was enough to stir murmurs again. Douglas Walker, tech billionaire, charismatic, calculating, now under federal investigation for contract fraud and financial misconduct totaling over $30 million. His legal team had just vanished, literally. His high-paid lawyer, after months of pretrial prep, had failed to show up on the first day of the hearing. Rumor was he'd fled the country. Douglas, seated beside the empty defense chair, turned and stared at Maya with an incredulous scowl. "You," he barked. "You should be home scrubbing baseboards, not playing dress-up in a courtroom." Laughter erupted again. Someone near the aisle muttered, bold of her to show up with a mop and legal ambitions. But Maya didn't back down. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I've studied every page of this case, every contract, every financial record, every testimony filed. I know this case better than anyone in this room." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Miss Johnson, are you a licensed attorney?" "No, sir. I attended Columbia Law, but left after my second year due to financial hardship. Since then, I've worked as household staff to pay off my family's debts, but I never stopped studying. I've followed federal court cases. I've spent the last 3 years poring over economic crime rulings. This case, in particular, I've memorized backward." The courtroom hushed. Even the prosecutor, Lauren West, a tall blonde woman in an immaculate navy suit, tilted her head slightly, intrigued despite herself. "Objection," she said. "This is highly irregular and borderline insulting to the justice system." The judge held up a hand, noted. "But as Mr. Walker's counsel has failed to appear, and if he agrees to allow Miss Johnson to speak on his behalf for this preliminary session, I will permit it under strict supervision." Douglas looked like he had swallowed vinegar. "You want me to let a maid represent me in federal court?" he muttered under his breath. Maya leaned close. "I may not have a license, Mr. Walker, but I know how they're setting you up. And right now, I'm the only person in this room not trying to bury you. If you believe Maya's courage deserves respect, comment 1 to show your support and like this video to spread her story, brought to you by BUP Stories." He stared at her, breathing heavily. Then, with a frustrated grunt, he waved his hand dismissively. "Fine, do your worst." Maya nodded and walked toward the defense table, every step deliberate. She laid the worn folder on the desk, opened it carefully. Inside were handwritten notes, cross-reference citations from real cases, color-coded tabs, and printouts of contracts, the very same ones Lauren West was planning to dismantle him with. Lauren leaned back, a smirk playing at her lips. "I hope you brought more than highlighters and grocery lists." Mia glanced up at her. "I brought logic and receipts." Gasps echoed. The judge cleared his throat. "Proceed, Miss Johnson." She stood, held a page before her. On the 12th of March of last year, Mr. Walker's company was approached to revise its joint venture agreement with Alter Holdings. That revision, which Miss West claims Mr. Walker forged, was signed electronically from an IP address based in Zurich. However, the original terms, she held up a highlighted paragraph, were still valid under the original SEC filing dated 2 weeks prior, which means if anyone committed forgery, it was the plaintiff. Lauren's smile vanished. Maya continued, voice steady, projecting clearly. The gallery, which had moments ago sneered, now leaned in. Her words had the ring of something rarer than expertise, conviction. Her fingers didn't tremble, not once. She had spent the past year secretly reading economic litigation during her late-night breaks. She had read transcripts until her eyes burned, taken notes during podcasts from legal analysts, even mailed herself documents to build a record in case she ever had the chance to speak. Today was that chance. The judge tapped his pen. This is compelling. We'll recess until tomorrow to examine the evidence and determine if further action is warranted. Miss Johnson, you may return, then pending review. Maya bowed slightly. Thank you, Your Honor. As she stepped back, her heart pounding, she could feel their eyes on her, curious, believing, shaken. Douglas Walker remained seated, lips tight, silent. But for the first time that day, he didn't look alone. That night, Maya sat at the small kitchen table in her basement apartment in Newark. The very table where she had once helped her little brother finish his math homework while stirring a pot of soup. Now, the table was covered in legal documents, sticky notes, a half-eaten grilled cheese sandwich, and her open laptop playing an old lecture from a trial law professor she used to admire. Her apron still hung on the back of the chair, stained from the morning rush at the Walker estate. The courtroom still echoed in her ears. She could see the faces, confused, amused, disbelieving, and Douglas Walker's face, one she couldn't read. She sipped cold coffee and leaned over the contracts again. There was something about the way the revised joint venture clause had been phrased. It used legal terminology that didn't match Douglas's previous contracts. It felt almost foreign. She jotted a note. Compare phrasing W, alter versus old partners. A buzz on her phone made her jump. Unknown number. You were something else today, said a low, amused voice. Didn't expect the girl in the apron to turn the room upside down. Maya froze. Who is this? Let's just say someone in that courtroom has more at stake than you know. You're poking a bear, Maya. Be careful where you stick the stick. The call ended. Her hand shook for a moment before she forced herself to breathe. Fear wasn't new. She'd grown up with it. Walking home alone from school through alleys, she had no choice but to cross, watching her mother work 3 jobs and still get eviction notices. But this fear was different. It was cold, calculated. The next morning, she returned to the Walker estate early. Douglas wasn't expecting her. I didn't ask for a meeting, he said when she appeared in his office, still wearing her usual gray cardigan and jeans. You also didn't ask for someone to save your name from being dragged through federal mud, she said, calm but firm. He stared at her. You think yesterday changed anything? I think it cracked a door. We need to open it. Douglas looked away, tapping a pen against his desk. You came prepared. I always am. You just never noticed. There was a pause. Maya stepped closer. Mr. Walker, someone is setting you up. That contract revision, it was too clean. And you signed it remotely. I was in Napa that week. Wine conference. I signed documents on the go. Standard practice. Do you remember opening that exact file? He hesitated. My assistant Paul usually preps the documents. I just glance and click. Maya's brow furrowed. Where is Paul now? He left last month. Said he needed a break from the pressure. Or maybe he needed distance. Douglas crossed his arms. You're implying Paul forged my signature. I'm saying someone used your trust to manipulate these documents. And I think it started with Paul. Later that afternoon, Maya took a subway to Midtown and found the old building where Paul had once shared a co-working space. She walked the hall slowly, scanning the nameplates. Switchanatvo still read Paul Temple, contract consultant. She knocked, no answer, but the door was ajar. Inside, papers were scattered, drawers open, a laptop missing from its charger. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and urgency. Something had spooked him. Maya backed out, heart racing. She took a photo of the office for reference, then turned to leave, but not before noticing a folder left on the floor near the desk. Inside, there were 3 copies of a contract draft identical to the ones in the court case, but 2 had different metadata footers. One listed Zurich, the other New Jersey. She clutched it tight, swallowing hard. The next morning in court, Mia waited quietly at the defense table, her notes ready. Douglas hadn't said much to her since their meeting, but he had nodded at her on the way in. It was something. Lauren West strutted in, her heels clicking like gunshots on marble. "Good morning," she said sweetly, but her eyes were cold. "Ready for round 2, counselor?" Maya stood. "More than you know." They argued over the contract's origin. Mia presented the differing metadata. Lauren objected, but the judge permitted the review. Then Mia pulled out the altered clause comparison. "Your Honor, the clause that supposedly implicates my client is worded in a legal dialect typical of European firms, not American contract language. My client's previous contracts follow U.S. standards. The phrasing shift indicates a ghost draft originating offshore. It is highly probable this was inserted by someone else." The courtroom was silent again. Douglas leaned slightly forward, his mouth barely open. Lauren's jaw tightened. "I request a delay," she said too quickly. "We need to verify the source of this evidence." "We already did," Maya interrupted, holding up a printed chain of custody report from a verified digital forensics firm. "This copy came from the hard drive of Paul Temple, who by the way hasn't been seen since yesterday morning." The judge nodded slowly. "This is no longer a simple fraud case. We may be looking at evidence tampering and conspiracy." As recess was called, Maya stepped outside into the cold wind, her lungs finally taking in air. She leaned on the railing and stared at the city below. Douglas joined her moments later. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," she replied, eyes still forward. "Just don't ever underestimate the woman in the apron again." Brought to you by BUP Stories. Maya returned to the Walker estate late that evening, exhaustion weighing down her limbs. The courtroom buzz was still replaying in her mind. Lauren West's startled expression, the murmur of the gallery, Douglas's stunned silence. It was the first time she felt like someone had heard her, not as a background presence, but as a voice that mattered. She kicked off her shoes in the side entrance and walked through the quiet kitchen. The staff had long gone. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock accompanied her as she reached for the teapot. She poured water into a mug, dropped in a chamomile bag, and leaned against the counter, closing her eyes. This kitchen was where it had started. 3 years ago, she'd stood in this very spot on her first day as a housekeeper, 22, broke with dreams deferred. She'd hidden her textbooks under the sink. At night, while others slept, she read court briefs by flashlight and scoured legal databases on a hand-me-down laptop. This place had become her secret classroom. She took a sip, then paused. There was something under her foot. She bent down and found a small torn envelope. It had no name, just the embossed logo of Alter Holdings. Her pulse quickened. She took the envelope to her tiny basement quarters and opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet, wrinkled and stained, an internal Alter memo dated 6 months before the lawsuit. It discussed potential strategic realignment with Douglas Walker's company and referenced a legal pathway to renegotiation should Mr. Walker resist favorable terms. A chill crawled up her spine. Strategic legal pressure even before the contract revisions. Maya stared at the paper. This wasn't just fraud. It was premeditated manipulation. She placed the memo in a plastic sleeve and tucked it into her growing case binder. Then she pulled out her notebook and scribbled names. Alter board members, legal reps, known associates. She underlined one, Martin Lai, former partner at a private equity firm, and now general counsel at Alter. His name had appeared in several emails she'd seen during court document reviews. The next morning, she called an old classmate from Columbia, Reggie Holmes, now working at a small but scrappy investigative paper in Queens. "Reggie, I need a favor." Quiet, fast, and strictly off record. He hesitated. "You asking for a background check number?" "I'm asking for a map of a fire before it spreads. I think someone's been setting this up long before the lawsuit." She met Reggie that night at a diner near his office. Over lukewarm coffee and a shared plate of fries, he slid a folder across the table. Lyles has ties with an offshore firm that specialized in contractual leverage. Legal speak for they draft fake pressure points to force renegotiation. Been involved in 2 whistleblower cases, both sealed. Maya's eyes widened. So they manufacture legal tension. That's the idea. And guess what? One of the whistleblowers was found dead 6 months after the settlement. Ruled an accident. No autopsy. Maya closed her eyes. God, you sure you want to keep going with this? She nodded. I don't have the luxury of backing out. Not when they're playing with people's lives. The next morning in court, Maya kept her expression neutral as Lauren West strutted in, armed with a fresh binder and a smug smile. Your Honor, Lauren began. We would like to request dismissal of yesterday's presented metadata evidence due to questionable chain of custody. Maya stood slowly. Objection. The court accepted the forensics review as authentic and we have further documentation tying the origin of the altered documents directly to an employee of the plaintiff. Lauren's eyes narrowed. Miss Johnson is not a licensed attorney. Her continued presence has uncovered more truth in 2 days than your entire firm in 2 months. The judge interrupted. Objection. Overruled. Whispers buzzed around the room. Douglas looked over at Maya. He didn't speak, but he gave the smallest nod. After the session, Mia returned to the Walker estate to retrieve the remaining house files. She passed the entry hall where portraits of the Walker family hung in perfect symmetry. Her footsteps echoed as she climbed the stairs and entered the office Paul had used before resigning. It smelled of dust and leather. She began pulling open drawers, cataloging the contents. Staplers, post-it pads, phone chargers, and then at the back of the lowest drawer, something heavier, a black planner. She opened it carefully. Inside were handwritten notes, mostly mundane reminders, grocery lists, client call times, but wedged between pages for the week of the 10th of April was a sticky note with 2 words scribbled in red ink, Zurich packet, and beneath it, a 4-digit code, 2913. Maya stared at it, heart pounding. That was the same week the contract had been signed remotely from Zurich. Could this be a safe deposit box? A courier file? She wasn't sure yet, but it was a clue, a real one. She was still staring when Douglas entered the office behind her. I should have paid more attention, he said quietly. Maya didn't turn. You trusted people who wanted your name more than your partnership. He stepped beside her, looking at the planner. And you? What do you want? She finally looked at him. Justice, even if no one writes about it in the papers. Douglas nodded slowly. You're wasting your brilliance cleaning marble floors. No, Mia replied. I've been preparing. She placed the planner into her binder and closed it carefully. Tomorrow, she said, we dig deeper. 2 hours after sunrise, Maya stood across the street from a dull gray building in Jersey City, her coat drawn tight against the early spring wind. The address matched the one she had tracked down after cross-referencing the 4-digit code from Paul's black planner with local courier lockers. The Zurich packet note had kept her up all night, flipping through theories, dates, and shipping manifests until the code finally led her. Private storage service used often by corporate clients for sensitive materials. She stepped inside, her boots echoing softly on the concrete floor. The woman at the front desk barely looked up as Maya approached. Locker access? The woman asked, chewing gum? Mia nodded and slid over the code on a sticky note. 2913, I'm here to collect on behalf of a former employee. The receptionist looked at the note, then back at Maya, suspicious. You got ID? I do. Maya handed over her state ID and held her breath. The photo was from years ago before her law school dropout, before the long days of scrubbing baseboards and nights filled with case law. The woman stared a second longer, then clicked her screen and grunted. Yeah, it's still active. Someone dropped the packet off 8 weeks ago. Said he'd come back for it. Never did. She handed Maya a small metal key. Lockers down the second row, numbers on the left. Maya did. Thanks. She walked briskly, her heart thudding harder with each step. The locker opened with a dry click. Inside was a slim sealed manila envelope. No label, no name, just a red wax seal with the letter L pressed into the center. Lee's. She slipped it into her coat and left, nerves crawling across her skin. Back in her apartment, she sat at her table and opened the envelope carefully, holding her breath like it might explode. Inside was a USB drive and a printed memo. The memo was addressed to internal counsel only and stamped confidential. Maya scanned the text, her stomach flipping. It was from Martin Lai to Alter Holdings Executive Board. The memo outlined legal architecture recommendations for achieving a hostile contract acquisition, including sample edits to clauses, guidelines for establishing remote signature trails through VPN rerouting, and language suggesting, quote, if resistance occurs, push legal action under pretext of misrepresentation. Her hands trembled. The USB held files, spreadsheets, several labeled with dates and Walker Enterprises project codes. She opened one marked Forecast Projections Alter Negotiation Third Round. It included a line item projected value from litigation leverage $23.4 million. They had budgeted for the lawsuit. Maya stared at the screen for a long time. This wasn't just about Douglas Walker anymore. It was about power abuse of it, weaponizing legality to steal equity and silence resistance. And it was happening in boardrooms just like this likely every day. She printed the memo and highlighted the core sections. Then she grabbed her coat and headed to the Walker estate. Douglas needed to see this now. He was on a call when she arrived. She handed him the memo wordlessly. He glanced at the heading and froze. Where did you get this? Paul left it in a storage locker. The USB has more. They had this plan months before you even hesitated to sign anything. Douglas rubbed his face, the blood draining from his cheeks. They were going to steal the company with or without me agreeing. Maya nodded and framed you in the process, so you couldn't fight back. He leaned back slowly. We need to bring this to the court. We will, she said. But first, we need to seal the trail. If we submit this without verifying the chain of custody, Lauren will rip it to shreds. Douglas exhaled. I'll call my IT lead. He's worked on secure financial forensics before. No, Mia said firmly. We don't tell anyone else yet. Not until we know who's clean. Later that evening, Maya took the files to Reggie at the diner. He examined the memo and USB files carefully. Whoever wrote this, he muttered, has the moral compass of a snake. Can you help trace the IP logs? Confirm it's Lee's network? Reggie nodded. Give me 2 days. Maybe less if my guy at the tech desk owes me a favor. As they talked, Maya noticed an older man across the diner watching her. His eyes were sharp, and he didn't even pretend to hide his interest. She stiffened slightly. Reggie noticed. Friend of yours? No, Maya murmured. But I've seen him before at the courthouse 2 days ago. Think you've been made? Maybe. That night, back home, Maya reinforced the deadbolt on her door, and downloaded the files onto 2 additional encrypted drives. She stashed one in a hollow book, the other in her freezer, wrapped in foil, and hidden behind a bag of frozen peas. A precaution she'd picked up from an old documentary on whistleblowers. Then she sat down and began drafting a timeline, every event, every signature, every meeting that had led to this moment. She outlined how the contract terms evolved, when Paul had submitted travel expenses from Switzerland, and when Lyles had suddenly requested full control of Alter's negotiation terms. By 2 a.m., her table was covered in highlighters and notes like a map of someone else's conspiracy, only it was all real and dangerously close to being buried. The next day in court, Maya walked in with steady steps. She greeted Douglas with a nod, avoided Lauren's stare, and took her seat at the defense table. The judge began. We will now hear any additional pretrial disclosures. Lunto, Your Honor, I'd like to request the court reject any further speculative claims from the defense, particularly from someone still without a license to practice law. Before the judge could speak, Maya rose. "I would like to submit a confidential memo authored by Martin Lai, general counsel for the plaintiff, outlining premeditated legal tactics, including forged documents and hostile acquisition strategies." Gasps filled the room. Lauren stepped forward. "This is absurd." Maya handed the document to the bailiff. The memo is timestamped, includes metadata logs, and was discovered in a secure storage location rented by Paul Temple, the former assistant to Mr. Walker. The judge read in silence for a long moment, then looked up. "This, if authentic, changes everything." Douglas looked at Maya, eyes wide with something new. Not just surprise, respect. Maya stood outside the courthouse after the hearing, the wind tugging at the edges of her coat. Her face was calm, but inside her pulse still pounded. The courtroom had erupted with murmurs, disbelief, and sharp whispers when the judge acknowledged the implications of the alter memo. She had expected resistance. She hadn't expected silence. Douglas exited behind her, his tie slightly loosened, eyes narrowed in a deep, calculating squint. He hadn't spoken much during the session, but now he stood beside her, his voice low. "You just tore the mask off a multi-billion-dollar operation." "I didn't do it for you," Maya said, not looking at him. "I did it because they thought no one would ever challenge them." Douglas's expression didn't shift. But something in his stance softened. "You just saved my name from being destroyed. You deserve more than gratitude." She turned to him. "I want access to everything. Full transparency. Every internal file related to the alter partnership, mails, memos, contracts. No more surprises," he nodded. "You'll have it by morning." That night, she returned home and found a white envelope slid under her apartment door. No name, just a plain sheet inside. "You've made enemies. Be careful what hill you choose to die on." No signature. She stared at the note for a long time before setting it on fire in her kitchen sink. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she printed backup copies of every file, loaded encrypted duplicates onto flash drives, and dropped one off with Reggie downtown just in case. By morning, a manila envelope was waiting on her porch. True to his word, Douglas had delivered internal communications from the last 18 months, including emails from Paul Temple, board minutes, and correspondence with alter executives. As she flipped through them, patterns emerged. One exchange stood out. A series of late-night emails between Paul and Martin Lyles, thinly veiled as consultation messages, but the timestamps matched nights Douglas had been traveling and unable to review files. Maya read them 3 times, her brow furrowed, subject lines like alter pressure plan, forwarding initial edits, and most damning, need this signed before Walker returns. They had counted on Douglas being distracted, busy, arrogant, inattentive. But the moment that plan unraveled, they'd turned on him, confident he wouldn't survive the scandal. And Paul had vanished the moment cracks appeared. Maya knew what she had to do next. That afternoon, she returned to Paul Temple's old apartment in the East Village. It had been listed for sublet on a local board, but she'd convinced the landlord to let her collect a forgotten item by pretending to be Paul's assistant. The place was empty, stripped bare, except for a pile of discarded folders on the kitchen counter. She sifted through them quickly and froze at one neatly printed receipt for a wire transfer to a Swiss bank dated 1 week before the lawsuit was filed. Recipient L Investments Zurich. Her fingers traced the number. She snapped a photo, folded the original, and pocketed it. Back outside, a sleek black car rolled up beside her. The back window slid down. Inside was a man she didn't recognize. Early 40s, tailored suit, pale blue eyes that didn't blink much. "Miss Johnson." She stepped back instinctively. "Who's asking?" "I'm a representative. Our firm believes this has gone far enough." "You're a smart woman. You know how this works." "You threatening me?" "Not at all. I'm giving you options. Stop now and no one gets hurt. Walk away. You've made your point." Maya stared at him, heart hammering. "Tell your people that the only way I'm walking away is through the front doors of that courtroom." With the truth in my hands, he didn't flinch. "Truth," he said softly, "can be expensive. Good thing I'm already broke. The window slid shut. The car pulled away. She stood there for a long moment, the city moving around her as if she weren't part of it. Then she turned and walked to the subway, her mind racing. That evening, she met with Douglas in his office. He looked older than usual, the weight of the scandal wearing at his confidence. "I don't know who I can trust anymore," he admitted, rubbing his temples. "Then trust evidence," she said, laying out the receipt and emails. His eyes scanned the documents. "I gave Paul everything. Let him sit in every board meeting. I thought he was loyal. Loyalty built on silence isn't loyalty, it's leverage." He looked up at her. "You think we can win this?" She nodded. "If we stay 3 steps ahead, if we stay loud, and if we make it impossible for them to erase what we found." Brought to you by BUP Stories. Douglas leaned back. "Considering you've done more for me in a week than a dozen high-priced lawyers did in a year." "I'm not doing this for you," she repeated. "I'm doing this for people like me who never get a seat at the table unless they drag their own chair through the door." He smiled faintly. "Then let's make sure no one ever takes the chair away." That night, as she sat back in her apartment with her notes, Maya thought of her father, the man who raised her on Malcolm X speeches and chess games on a milk crate table in the Bronx. He died too soon to see her graduate. Too soon to see her fight like this. But she could almost hear his voice in the silence. "Don't let them forget your name, baby girl. Make them remember who stood up when no one else did." She opened her laptop, stared into the glow of the screen and whispered to the darkness, "I'm not backing down." Rain drizzled down the courthouse steps as Maya climbed them one by one the next morning. Her coat was soaked through, hair curling slightly at the edges, but her grip on the evidence folder never loosened. She had gone over it 10 times the night before, every memo, transfer receipt, email, and timestamp. Today wasn't just another hearing. Today they were submitting the documents that might finally shatter the altar facade. Inside the courtroom, the energy was different, more eyes on her now. Less mockery, more uncertainty. Some still saw her as an anomaly, others as a threat. But for the first time, they didn't dismiss her. Lauren West walked in moments later, face tight, flanked by 2 men in dark suits, not colleagues, lawyers of her own insurance. When the judge entered, the room fell into silence. "We will begin with new evidence submitted by the defense," the judge said. "Miss Johnson," Maya stood. "Your Honor, we present Exhibit C, a series of internal emails between Mr. Paul Temple and Mr. Martinell, as well as financial records showing a transfer to an offshore account tied to an entity owned by Mr. Lyles. These documents support our claim that the lawsuit brought by Alter Holdings was not only unfounded, but manufactured with intent to defraud and forcibly acquire Mr. Walker's company." She handed the documents to the bailiff. Every step felt slow, deliberate, as if time had thickened in the room. The judge read in silence. Lauren remained still, but her jaw was visibly clenched. Then came the moment Maya had anticipated. "Miss West?" the judge asked, "Do you have a response to these new allegations?" Lauren rose. "Your Honor, we question the authenticity of these documents. There's no proof they weren't fabricated after the fact. Furthermore, these alleged financial transactions could have been forged." "We anticipated that claim," Maya interrupted, stepping forward. "Which is why we had them independently verified by a digital forensics team with signatures cross-matched against prior filings and transfer data confirmed through the Swiss intermediary's own audit logs. Their sworn affidavit is included in the packet." The judge took a deep breath. "Very well. I will review this thoroughly. For now, both parties are instructed to remain available for continued examination." Recess was called, but no one stood. There was a sense of reckoning in the air. Douglas leaned over to Maya, whispering, "You didn't just shake their foundation. You cracked it wide open." "I'm not here to shake things," she said quietly. "I'm here to make sure no one builds lies on broken ground again." Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. Maya kept her head down, pushing past the flashing lights and rapid-fire questions. A voice called out from the crowd. "Miss Johnson, is it true you were a maid before taking this case?" She paused, turned back. Yes, I was, and I still clean the same kitchen 3 nights a week. A few reporters chuckled, unsure whether she was joking. Maya leaned forward slightly into the microphone. Let me be clear, I didn't need a corner office or 1,000 suit to see injustice. All I needed was my voice and the truth. The crowd fell silent. That evening, Maya sat at the diner with Reggie again. He was scrolling through headlines on his phone. You're trending. She raised an eyebrow. For what? He turned the screen to her. There it was. A photo of her standing in the rain, folder clutched to her chest, eyes sharp with focus. The headline read, "The maid who might take down a billion-dollar empire." She exhaled. That's not what this is about. No, Reggie said. But it's what they understand. A woman who wasn't supposed to speak, speaking loudly. A black woman in an apron showing up where billionaires crumble. That's the story. She shook her head. I don't want fame. I want justice. Reggie leaned in. Then stay ready. Because when you speak truth to power, power speaks back and it doesn't always whisper. As if on cue, Maya's phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. He knows where you live. She swallowed. They're not even pretending anymore. Reggie's face hardened. You need protection. Let me get someone to stay near your building. Quiet. No drama. I'll be fine, she said, but her voice lacked its usual steel. That night, her sleep was shallow. Every creak of the pipes, every groan of the walls made her eyes fly open. She kept her binder on the nightstand, hand resting on it like a shield. By morning, she looked worn but ready. She returned to Douglas's estate for one last meeting before the next hearing. He looked up from his desk as she entered. You're making enemies in high places. I don't mind heights, she said. I just want to know where the ladder ends. He slid a new document. I had my private counsel draft a motion to dismiss the lawsuit based on criminal tampering. With your evidence, it could work. Maya read it carefully, nodding. Good, but we don't just dismiss, we countersue. Fraud, defamation, emotional distress. Let them feel what it's like to have the system turned on them. Douglas studied her. You've changed. No, she said. I've just stopped hiding. As she left his office, Douglas stared after her for a long moment. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel like the most powerful person in the room, and he didn't mind it one bit. The courtroom was buzzing before the judge even entered. The press benches were filled. Some reporters standing in the back whispering updates into their microphones. The entire city, it seemed, was watching. Not just because of the billions at stake or the corporate reputation of Alter Holdings, but because of her, Maya Johnson, the woman in the apron who had become a symbol of silent resistance breaking into the loudest rooms. She walked into the chamber with calm steps wearing a simple navy dress, her binder clutched in one hand. Her face was tired but composed. She didn't make eye contact with the cameras. She didn't need to. She already had their attention. Douglas stood as she approached the defense table. They're calling it the case of the cleaning lady. That's what CNN ran with last night. She didn't flinch. Let them. That's what they understand. They don't know what it means to prepare case law in a laundry room with roaches on the wall. They don't know what it means to keep fighting when no one even knows you're in the ring. He gave her a quiet nod. You're going to win this. We are going to win it, she corrected, but not by playing their game. We make our own rules now. The judge entered and court was called to order. Today, he announced, we will review the defense's motion to dismiss based on submitted evidence of fraud, tampering, and unethical corporate behavior. The court has reviewed the documents overnight. Miss West, the floor is yours. Lauren stood, her usual poise dulled just slightly by fatigue. Your Honor, we maintain that the defense's evidence is circumstantial and improperly sourced. We request exclusion under Rule 403. Maya stood before the judge could speak. Your Honor, I have additional verification regarding the Swiss transfer. The receiving bank has confirmed that the account belongs to an entity with Mr. Martin Lyles as a primary beneficiary. They've provided notarized confirmation, which I've included in our latest exhibit. The judge motioned for the documents. Continue. Furthermore, Maya added, stepping forward. We have a new witness, an Alter Holdings junior associate who has agreed to testify under federal protection. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. Lauren's voice cracked slightly. Who? Maya remained still. Her name is withheld for security reasons, but she has first-hand knowledge of internal conversations regarding the fabrication of contract clauses, manipulation of IP routing, and the effort to defame Mr. Walker. The judge leaned forward. If this witness confirms the validity of the claims, and if her testimony is found credible, it would constitute grounds for full dismissal and open a new criminal investigation. Lauren sank slightly in her chair. Court was recessed until the witness could be prepared for examination. Outside the courtroom, Mia met with the witness, a young woman named Elise, no older than 23, pale, nervous, clutching a messenger bag against her chest like armor. You sure about this? Maya asked softly. Elise nodded. I was there when Martin told the team to alter the metadata. I heard him say that the goal wasn't winning. It was ruining. They wanted to destroy Mr. Walker's name so no one else would ever question their leverage again. Maya placed a hand on her shoulder. You're doing something most people never would. I'm just tired of being quiet, Elise said, her voice trembling. I couldn't sleep anymore. Ma nodded. Then let's give them something to remember. That evening, Mia walked the familiar streets back to her apartment. Newark felt heavier these days, like the concrete itself was watching. She passed the corner bodega, waved to Mr. Lee, the owner, who always gave her a free bottle of water when she worked double shifts. You're on the news again, he said, smiling with cracked teeth. You give them hell, Maya. She smiled faintly. That's the plan. Back home, her apartment was darker than usual. She reached for the light switch and stopped. The lamp on her desk had been knocked over. Her notes were scattered. Someone had been inside. She stood frozen, listening. No sound, no movement. Then she backed out slowly, heart thudding, and called Reggie from the hallway. Someone broke in. They didn't take anything. They just wanted me to know. Reggie cursed softly. You need to stay somewhere else tonight. My cousin's got a place in Hoboken. Quiet building, mostly retirees. No one will look for you there. Maya hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, okay. That night, in a small one-bedroom filled with doilies and porcelain cat figurines, Maya sat on a borrowed couch and stared at her case files. She should have been afraid, but she was beyond fear now. She was focused. She called Douglas just before midnight. I want to go public, she said. He paused. You're already public. No, she replied. I mean full transparency, press conference. Show the documents. Make it impossible for them to bury it. You'll make yourself a target. I already am. Douglas exhaled. Okay, I'll arrange it, but once we step out into that spotlight, there's no coming back. Maya stared out the window at the quiet street. Then we stepped together. The next morning, standing behind a podium outside the courthouse, Maya faced a wall of microphones and reporters. Flashbulbs went off. Her voice was calm. I was not hired to fight this case. I wasn't trained to stand in a courtroom, but I have stood for the truth, and I will keep standing because power built on lies deserves to fall. Behind her, Douglas nodded once, his face unreadable. And somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, she's not just defending him. She's defending all of us. The day after the press conference, Maya woke up in the quiet apartment in Hoboken to a soft knock at the door. She opened it slowly, half expecting a reporter or worse. But it was Reggie holding 2 coffees and a bag of croissants from the corner cafe. Thought you could use some fuel, he said, stepping in with a cautious smile. Maya took one of the cups. Thanks. I barely slept. I kept waiting for something to happen. A call, a knock, anything. Well, Reggie said, sitting down beside her. Sometimes the most dangerous moment isn't when they come after you, it's when they go quiet. Maya nodded. She understood. After the press conference, there'd been a wave of support. Messages poured in from people she didn't know, single mothers, law students, janitors who said her story reminded them of their own fights. But the silence from Alter, that was unsettling. No statement, no denial, no counterattack, just stillness. Douglas called mid-morning. Lyles hasn't shown up to his office in 2 days, he said without greeting. Lauren West filed a motion to withdraw from the case this morning. Claimed conflict of interest. Maya stood from the couch stunned. She's backing out. Looks like it. And Elise was contacted by someone last night. Not a threat, not directly, but a message. They know she's testified. They're scrambling. Maya said they know it's falling apart. Douglas lowered his voice. Maya, I've seen men with money do unspeakable things to protect a secret. Be careful. I'm not going back underground. She replied, not now. By noon, news outlets were reporting on Lyle's disappearance. Financial records were leaked, suggesting accounts in Panama, Zurich, and Singapore, all connected to shell companies Alter had denied knowledge of. The story had gone from courtroom drama to potential corporate collapse. Maya sat with Reggie, watching the coverage. This isn't about me anymore, she whispered. It's about all the people they've done this to who never had the chance to fight back. Reggie nodded. You're becoming the face of something bigger. She turned to him. Then I need to act like it. That afternoon, Maya met with Douglas at a private law office he'd rented for emergency meetings. Inside were stacks of files, a hired security detail, and a woman named Marcia Delgadoan, independent legal advisor, brought in to help draft a countersuit. I've reviewed the documentation, Marcia said after an hour of quiet study. You have a case not just for dismissal, but for damages, emotional distress, corporate sabotage, possibly even witness endangerment. Maya watched Douglas carefully. You ready for that? I've lost more than reputation, Douglas said. They tried to strip me of everything, my name, my legacy, and they nearly succeeded. Maya added. And they would have if someone hadn't been stubborn enough to read every line. They thought no one would check. Marcia looked up. You know they'll try to settle once it's clear you won't back down. Maya's voice was steady. Then we don't settle. We make sure every piece of this is public. We drag it all into the light. Douglas leaned back. This is war now. No, Maya corrected. This is justice. War is what they did when they thought no one was watching. That night, as she returned to the Hoboken apartment, her phone buzzed again. Another blocked number. She answered with a steady voice. Hello? Thought you were clever, huh? The voice was gruff, older, thick with disdain. You think you've won something? Not yet, Maya replied calmly. You don't know who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Men who hide behind power and fear, but I'm not afraid of either. The line went dead. She stared at the screen for a long time, then opened her laptop and began working. She drafted a full statement of facts, linking each document, timeline, and piece of evidence into a single coherent narrative. She emailed copies to 3 different lawyers, 2 trusted journalists, and stored one more on an encrypted drive. If anything happened to her, the truth wouldn't die with her. The following morning, Elise, the whistleblower, called in tears. They tried to get to my father, she said. He owns a dry cleaning shop in Flatbush. Someone came in last night, broke the front window, didn't steal anything, just left a note. Stay quiet. Mia's stomach twisted. Is he okay? He's shaken. I am too, but I'm not backing down. Mia closed her eyes. We're almost there. Just hold on. By Friday, the judge ordered a full evidentiary hearing. Lyles was still missing, and Alter's board released a half-hearted statement denying involvement, but their stock had dropped 19% in 2 days. Shareholders were panicking. Investigations were being launched by the SEC. Douglas stood beside Maya outside the courthouse steps. This time, not as a man seeking redemption, but as an ally in the fight. Reporters asked questions, cameras flashed, but it was Maya who stepped up to the microphone. "This isn't just a victory for me or for Mr. Walker. This is a moment for everyone who's ever been silenced by a system designed to protect the powerful. We've shown that with truth, persistence, and the courage to keep standing, even the strongest walls can crack." The crowd applauded, and somewhere in the back, Elise stood silently, tears on her cheeks. Maya caught her eye and nodded. They were no longer fighting in the shadows. They were building something brighter, something lasting. And the storm that had once threatened to destroy them was finally breaking apart, one lie at a time. The morning of the evidentiary hearing arrived with an eerie calm. A pale light seeped through the clouds as Maya walked up the courthouse steps, flanked not by security guards or lawyers, but by the weight of a nation watching. Her name had become more than a headline. It was a symbol now whispered in cafes, written in blogs, quoted in college classrooms. She passed through the metal detectors, her binder clutched to her chest. Inside were the last pieces: emails confirming internal discussions between Alter board members, depositions from other staffers, and most importantly, a sworn statement from Elise's father, now backed by community support after the attack on his store. Douglas met her just outside the courtroom door. He looked tired but resolved. His suit was crisp, but his eyes held something gentler than before. Gratitude, maybe. Respect. "You ready?" he asked. Maya gave a half smile. "I was born ready. They just didn't know it." The judge entered the courtroom moments later, his presence commanding the hush that followed. The room was packed: press, spectators, junior lawyers clutching notepads, and a handful of Alter board members who had chosen to show up not to defend the company, but likely to protect their individual reputations. Today's hearing, the judge began, will determine whether the court recognizes the claims of fraud and misconduct presented by the defense and whether we proceed to trial or refer these findings to a higher authority for criminal investigation. Maya stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to begin by submitting Exhibit D, an email from Mr. Lyles dated 2 months prior to the lawsuit filing, in which he outlines a path of pressure through legal maneuvering intended to destabilize Mr. Walker's holdings and force a renegotiation of key assets." The judge raised an eyebrow, and the authenticity confirmed by 3 forensic analysts. Metadata aligns with known device logs, and the sending IP traces back to an Alter Holdings secure VPN. Lauren West was gone. In her place was a stiff-looking man from a white shoe firm trying hard to remain stone-faced. He stood. "Your Honor, the plaintiff does not deny the existence of the email, but claims it was taken out of context." Maya didn't wait. "Then let's put it in context." She pulled up a projection of the full thread. The chain includes responses from other board members agreeing to the plan, including comments like, "Walker won't see it coming," and "Make sure Paul handles the signature trail." Gasps echoed through the gallery. The judge glanced at the screen, then at the new plaintiff's counsel. "Do you have a response?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "Not at this time." The judge looked toward Douglas. "Mr. Walker, do you wish to make a statement?" Douglas stood slowly. "I built my company with people I trusted. Some of them betrayed that trust. But what matters today is not just clearing my name. It's recognizing what was done to silence voices like Miss Johnson's. She wasn't supposed to be heard, but she is loudly, clearly, and truthfully." He turned to Maya. "And I thank her, not as a businessman, but as a man who nearly forgot that truth matters more than pride." Mia's throat tightened, but she remained focused. "Elise," she said gently. "Would you like to speak?" The young woman stood shaking slightly but with a fire in her eyes. "I joined Alter because I believed in opportunity. I stayed silent because I was afraid. But Maya gave me courage. And today I want the court to know that Martinell instructed several of us to alter timestamps and destroy digital records. I did it. I'm ashamed, but I will no longer be part of hiding the truth." The judge nodded solemnly. The next hour passed in a flurry of document presentations, cross-referencing financial records showing video footage of Lyle entering a private banking office in Zurich, footage obtained with the help of an investigative team Douglas had hired after Maya's recommendation. Then came the judge's voice, clear and final. Given the weight of the evidence, the credibility of the witnesses, and the failure of the plaintiff to contest these findings meaningfully, I am dismissing the case in full. Furthermore, I am referring these materials to the U.S. Attorney's Office for potential prosecution under federal fraud statutes. This court is adjourned. There was no explosion of cheers, no applause, just silence, heavy, reverent, like the moment after a storm breaks and the world holds its breath. Outside, reporters surged. Maya stood on the steps once more, now not as a question mark, but as the answer. When asked for comment, she simply said, "Truth is slow, but it never stops walking." Douglas stood beside her, silent for a moment, then added, "This woman didn't just defend me. She defended every working person who ever got stepped on and told to be grateful for it." Later that night, back at the Hoboken apartment, Maya sat alone with her binder on her lap. The case was over, but the fight wasn't. There were more battles to be fought, laws to challenge, systems to question. Her phone buzzed again. It was Elise. "You okay?" Maya asked. "I am now. And my dad wants to meet you. He says you remind him of someone he used to believe in." Maya smiled. "I'd like that." She hung up and walked to the window. Outside, the lights of the city glowed soft and endless. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, to feel the stillness, not as warning, but as peace. The system had tried to silence her, but Maya had spoken, and the world had listened. The days following the courtroom victory were a blur of headlines, interviews, and cautious celebration. Mia's phone never stopped buzzing. She declined most television appearances, choosing instead to speak directly through a single op-ed in The Atlantic, where she outlined her experience and warned of the silent ways power masks itself in legality. But beneath the public attention, she felt the quiet bruising of everything she carried. Victory was not healing. Justice, hard-won, still came with scars. Douglas invited her to dinner at a small restaurant near Battery Park, far from his usual haunts. No ties, no headlines, just two people who had survived something enormous together. "I keep expecting it to fall apart," he said as they sat over 2 bowls of clam chowder, "like someone's going to knock on the door and tell me it was all a dream." "It wasn't," Maya replied. "But dreams don't leave bruises like this." He chuckled softly. "How are you holding up?" She stirred her spoon in slow circles, tired, a little paranoid, but clearer than I've ever been. "And you?" He leaned back, relieved, but aware. "I know now how close I came to becoming the villain in someone else's story. If you hadn't shown up, I would have signed away everything I believed in." She looked at him carefully. "You were never the villain. But you were blind, and the system counted on that." He nodded. "I'll never stop paying attention again." They clinked glasses of wine, her water, not a toast to victory, but to vigilance. The next morning, Maya visited Elisa's father's dry cleaning shop. The glass had been replaced and a small thank you Maya sign sat taped to the inside of the door. Inside, the man himself stood behind the counter folding a pressed shirt. "You must be Maya," he said with a thick Brooklyn accent. "Elise told me you're tougher than steel and kinder than bread." She smiled. "That's high praise." He motioned to a stool behind the counter. "Come sit. Let me tell you something." Maya did. He folded quietly, then spoke. When Elise was a kid, she used to sneak into the back with her comic books and say she was training to be a hero. I'd laugh, because I thought the world didn't let girls like her get capes. But then you walked into that courtroom and you made the whole world listen. So thank you." Maya swallowed hard. "I didn't do it alone." No one ever does," he said, smiling. "But someone's got to start it." They shared coffee. And for a while, it felt like family. Later that week, Maya stood before a crowd at a community law forum in Harlem. She wasn't wearing a suit, just a sweater and jeans. Her voice, the same quiet power that had carried through every courtroom. Justice, she said, doesn't happen in marble halls. It starts in mailrooms, in kitchens, in janitor closets. It starts with someone saying, no, this isn't right. Even if no one else is listening. And sometimes it ends with people in power losing their comfort so that truth can breathe. The crowd stood and clapped, not out of obligation, but because they saw themselves in her struggle, in her courage. After the event, a young black woman approached her, maybe 20 years old, holding a battered copy of Civil Procedure for Beginners. Miss Johnson, I want to do what you did. I want to fight for people who don't even know they need help yet. Maya took the book, thumbed through its wrinkled pages, and handed it back. Then start by learning their names, their pain, their stories. Law is just a tool. The real work is in listening. The girl nodded. Thank you. As Maya walked back to her car, she passed by a mural on a nearby wall, freshly painted, vibrant in the late afternoon sun. It was her apron and all, standing with her arms folded. Behind her, the words, "She didn't ask for permission." She stared at it for a long time. Then she laughed, a short, surprised breath of joy. She took a photo, not for social media, but for herself, proof that something had changed. Back in her apartment that night, Maya sat at her kitchen table. The binder, the one she had carried through it all, was now closed. But she didn't put it away. Not yet. She opened her laptop and began to draft a new document, the People's Law Project. Her goal wasn't to become a partner in a firm. It was to create something accessible, a foundation where ordinary workers, underpaid employees, and whistleblowers could seek legal guidance without fear of price tags or retaliation. Because justice, she knew, should never depend on the size of your wallet or the shine of your shoes. As she typed, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. The wound had not healed. The fight was not over. But Maya Johnson, the woman who once scrubbed floors in silence, was now building a stage for voices just like hers. And this time, the world was ready to listen. 1 year later, the courtroom was different this time. Smaller, less formal, tucked away in the heart of New York's old legal district. No cameras, no media storm, just rows of working-class citizens seated in folding chairs, quiet and attentive. Maya stood at the front, not in the defendant's box, not on the witness stand, but behind a lectern bearing a modest plaque. The People's Law Project. Free legal access for every worker. She looked out over the crowd, mechanics, bus drivers, home health aides, janitors, baristas, people like her. People who knew the taste of struggle and the weight of silence. This was her audience now. Her mission. Most of you know my story. She began, her voice even, warm. And if you don't, you've probably heard someone else tell it louder than I ever intended it to be told. A few chuckles broke the stillness. I never planned to be a lawyer. I planned to work, to survive, to keep my head down and do the best I could with what I had, but something happened. I saw something wrong. And I spoke. And then everything changed. She paused. But here's the thing. Nobody tells you. Speaking up is only the first step. Justice is not a one-time act. It's a daily choice. A fight that doesn't end in the courtroom. It begins there. And it continues here in rooms like this with people like us. At the back, Douglas Walker stood quietly, hands clasped, smiling faintly. His company had recovered, smaller, but more ethical now. He had appointed Maya as an external ethics consultant, but she hadn't taken a salary. She asked that the budget go toward funding this very room. I started the People's Law Project, Maya continued, because too many people were being asked to understand the law with no help, no translation, no defense. We were told to trust a system that was never built with us in mind. She glanced at the wall where a mural had been painted, hands reaching upward, not for power, but for justice. It mirrored the one in Harlem, but this one was filled with real names of those the project had helped in its first year. People wrongly fired, whistleblowers protected, tenants defended. And now, Maya said, we've trained 25 volunteers to offer free guidance. We've translated court forms into Spanish, Haitian Creole, and Tagalog. We've opened 3 satellite offices, and we're just getting started. Applause filled the room, not explosive, steady, respectful, real. After the gathering, Maya stepped outside into the autumn air. The sky was gray, but not heavy. She took a deep breath. Elise joined her, bundled in a trench coat, her cheeks red from the wind. "Can you believe it's been a year?" Elise asked, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Feels like longer," Maya replied. "But also like yesterday." "I still get scared," Elise admitted. "That someone's watching. That we'll wake up and it'll all disappear." Maya put a hand on her shoulder. "The fear doesn't go away, but it gets smaller when you're not alone." They walked together toward the subway, ordinary again, safe in the crowd. Later that night, Maya sat at her kitchen table, same spot, same chair. The binder was still there, now filled with notes and printed messages from people she'd helped. A new folder sat beside it marked Legislation Draft Whistleblower Protection Expansion Bill. She wasn't finished. As she typed, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her chest tightened for a moment. Then she answered, "Maya Johnson." A pause. Then a woman's voice, soft, hesitant. "Hi, you don't know me. My name is Cassandra. I clean offices in Midtown. Last week, I found something I wasn't supposed to see. They told me to forget it, but I can't. I don't know what to do." Maya smiled gently. "You did the right thing by calling. You're not alone." Silence on the line, then a sob. Then, "Thank you." Maya looked out the window at the city she had once believed would never listen to her. And now it was calling. She leaned back in her chair and whispered, "Let's begin again." Because justice wasn't just a battle. It was a legacy, and hers had only just begun. The story of Maya Johnson teaches us that true justice often begins in the quietest corners, behind brooms, inside kitchens, or among those whose voices have long been ignored. It reminds us that courage isn't about titles or degrees, but about choosing to speak up when it's easier to stay silent. Maya's journey shows that even the most unlikely individuals can dismantle powerful systems when armed with truth, persistence, and empathy. Her fight is a testament to the enduring power of integrity and the belief that everyone deserves to be heard, no matter where they come. Brought to you by BUP Stories.